I might be a little rusty today, but before I get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. Number one, there's things today that you have heard or seen before. I'm not going to deny that at all. This talk is really a culmination of three things. I owned my own company for 16 years, so I went through a ton of sales training from everyone with Tony Robbins, Stephen Covey, Simon Sinek. So some of the things you're going to see today, you've probably seen from these guys. So this talk is really a culmination of a whole lot of sales training, a little bit of research, and the scar tissue of a 35-year career in sales. I'm going to do that again because I've never had a group not that I could be old enough to. Number two, I have given this talk over 50 times, and never once have I given the same speech, the exact same speech, because something pops into my head and I just go off on tangents. I know we're limited on time, so I will try to limit that today. Can't guarantee that I won't, but I will. Most likely wander off a little bit. And number three, it is not my intent today to embarrass or offend anyone. How I got into this, or how I kind of started this journey, is the story I'm about to tell you. And some of the language in it is just a hair colorful, so I'm not trying to embarrass or offend anyone. But I also said the funniest yet most accurate thing I've ever said in my life. So it's really a pretty good story. And that story started in 1997, excuse me. I was working for a company called East Bay. You guys know East Bay? Mail order, sporting goods. And I was at a convention, football convention, in Dallas, Fort Worth. And I was traveling with two of my coworkers, and my coworkers, the show got done at 6 o'clock, and I had a meeting with the president and team salespeople from Reebok, which is a very old statement in and of itself. So I got done, I sent my two guys back to the Hilton, and I stayed and had my meeting with Reebok, got done at about 8 o'clock, and I walk out and I jump in a cab. And when I jumped in the cab, I noticed that the cab driver was wearing a Dallas Cowboys hat, Dallas Cowboys t-shirt, and a Dallas Cowboys air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror. And through my extensive sales training, I picked up on subtle hints saying, I bet she's a Cowboys fan. Sure, but so I strike up a conversation. I said, so what does a Dallas Cowboys air freshener smell like? Does it smell like Troy Aikman or the locker room? Because I really think so. We get to talking, and he says, well, Packers, we just won the Super Bowl in '96. That was Brett Favre's Super Bowl. So that was, and Dallas, at the time, remember 1997, had won 5 Super Bowls. So this guy goes, well, cheesehead, what's in your briefcase? You got a bunch of cheese? I deserve that from the air freshener company. He says, well, you know, nobody has won more Super Bowls than our Dallas Cowboys. Well, in 1997, he was right. Kind of. And I said, well, you have won, but you're actually tied with San Francisco. Now, if you tell someone in Texas that they're not the biggest, best, fastest, it's like telling them their mama is a horrible cook. So I already offended this guy right out of the gate. And he said, oh, shit. And I said, no. I said, actually, San Francisco 49ers have won 5 as well. They won in 82, they won in 85, 89, 90, and 95. You guys are tied for most. Again, that's like kicking his mother in the shin. So I said, and so I took a step further and I said, well, actually, you guys aren't even halfway there to the amount of Super Bowls and championships that Packers have won. We've won 12. But you're almost halfway there. Not bad. Exactly. So remember, we hadn't won that one yet. So he says to me, well, shit. Looky who I picked up in my cab. I picked up Alex Einstein. That's Alex. I said, well, Mr. Einstein, I guess you're just some genius and I'm just some Texas asshole. And I said, no, sir. No, I wasn't suggesting that at all. I wouldn't limit it to Texas. I think you could be an asshole anywhere. That's funny, right? He slams on the, I swear to you, sorry. He slams on the brakes. Says, "Get the hell out of that cab!" I said, "You can't," I was making a joke. I said, "I can't get," I opened the door to the cab, and I swear to you, I was 25 feet away from the downtown building. So I got a free cab ride for nothing. So I meet up with my coworkers, we have dinner that night, and I'm telling them the story, and we're laughing hysterically. And then it kind of hit me. I said, I tell my coworkers, I said, we could drive down here in a semi full of football cleats and sneakers and equipment and give it away for free, and these guys wouldn't take it. We're not part of their network. We're not part of the good old boy network. And if you don't believe one doesn't exist in Texas, you've never been to Texas. So that's when I began this journey and this kind of, just to learn about how successful companies and people connect and are successful when they are not the first, at top of mind, first of choice. So that's what we're going to talk about today. According to the Office of Consumer Affairs, in 2020, US-based companies spent just under $400 billion on customer satisfaction surveys and customer satisfaction training. $400 billion to find out if we're satisfied. Now there's industries like the automotive industry, credit card, travel, hospitality, that can spend upwards of 10% of their net revenue on customer satisfaction, and that drives that number up. But they're spending hundreds of billions of dollars to find out basically if they're doing their job. You want to know what that's like? I'm going to borrow you, Karen, since it's your anniversary. Just play along. Okay, so Karen, you and I have known each other for 20 years. For 20 years, I've been asking you out on a date to go out for dinner with me, and here we are, you said yes. I always promised myself, if you said yes, I was going to say 3 words to you. 3 little words that are going to change your life. Lower your standards. Maybe we can do a little better, right? You guys have heard of Nielsen research company, Nielsen ratings. They're most famous for TV ratings. In 2010, they polled people from throughout the world and asked them, what is your number 1 influencer when it comes to choosing companies or your purchasing decisions? And in 2010, just under 80% said recommendations from people they know and trust. That same survey in 2015, that number jumps up to 90%. That's not just a generational thing. It goes from Generation Z all the way to the silent generation. Their number 1 influencer is recommendations from people they know and trust. That's not just a United States phenomenon, it's a global phenomenon. Every developed country on the planet, the number 1 influencer is recommendations from people they know and trust. Now that's old data. So 2020, Nielsen took that a little further. If you remember anything today, remember this slide. Nielsen wanted to see if this was a trend with the advent of online shopping, with the advent of internet and productivity, and what would make people, what is their number 1 influencer when making their purchasing decisions? So what Nielsen did is they asked people under the age of 20, what is your number 1 influencer? 96% of those under the age of 20 said their number 1 influencer is recommendations from people they know and trust. Now, remember this, and the people over the age of 20, it went up to 92%. Recommendations from people they know and trust. If you remember anything today, remember this. Those people under the age of 20 are not full-time consumers. They're part-time consumers. They have not entered the workforce yet. But this behavior is not going to change. And it's not going to change for one very simple reason. This is a learned behavior. We'll talk about that a little later when, believe it or not, we're going to talk about how your brain works. We'll talk about that a little bit later. According to the Office of Consumer Affairs, a loyal client is worth over 10 times the value to that company of the value of their first purchase. They also realized in that study that it costs companies almost 7 times as much to acquire a new client as it does to maintain an existing one. American Express did a study a little bit a few years ago and said the number of people that, if you have a bad customer experience, on average they're going to tell over 7 people. If they have a great experience, 3. The value that you provide every time you answer the phone, every time you walk into a home, and every time any of us meet anyone personally is going to have an impact on whether they follow us and follow the companies that we represent. The American Express study also said that it takes 12 positive experiences, 12, to make up for just one bad customer experience. That's not what I want to do.
Yeah, they have on sale brochures, so I guess we gotta get these miniature marshmallows. I'll do the crescent rolls, and you do the cranberries. No, I can't cook.
I don't understand my reservation. Do you have my reservation?
Yes, we do. Unfortunately, we ran out of cost.
Double bacon cheeseburger is for half for under.
Well, you gonna spin it now?
No, it's just Tom, that's what makes it good.
But the reservation keeps the car here. That's why you have the reservation.
I know why we have reservations.
I don't think you do. If you did, I'd have a car.
Don't spit in that cop's burger.
Thanks.
You know, but I'll see you tomorrow then. Gobble, gobble. Oh, bye-bye.
Give me a liter of cola.
A what?
A liter of cola.
Liter cola? Do we make liter cola?
Just order a large Farva. I don't want a large Farva. I want a liter of cola.
I don't know what that is.
Liter is French. Or give me some cola before I break loose.
Relax.
Okay, I believe you have to fill out a form for that.
No, I'd like my money back now.
I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. You see, I have to fill out a form and, well, you ate most of it already, so.
I'm sorry. We stopped serving breakfast, but we are on lunch menu now.
I want breakfast.
We can't have it. We're not serving it.
If you don't shut up, I'm gonna kick 100% of you. Is there a pump here?
I like some breakfast. We stopped serving breakfast.
So you know how to take the reservation, you just don't know how to hold it. That's really the most important part of the reservation, the hold. Anybody can just take it.
That's God's favorite. So we've all had that experience. Gallup research has shown that companies that engage emotional connections with their clients, those are their words, not mine, outperform their competitors by over 26% in gross margin and by over 85% in sales growth. In fact, the Gallup research demonstrated that emotionally engaged clients are going to recommend your company more often than not. They're going to purchase from you again. They're not going to worry that much about price. Yeah, be competitive, but they're not going to worry that much about price. And so they're willing to buy from you more often. They're willing to buy from you they're willing to buy from you more frequently, and they're not going to shop around if they are emotionally engaged to you. Very early in my research, I came across this quote, and if you can't read it, it says, "The power of service lies in its ability to create an emotional connection rather than a purely rational." This is the mantra of Disney. Disney employees are not called employees, they're called the dream makers. And Disney employees, whether they work in the park, their hotels, restaurants, anything, every single one of Disney's employees is actually trained to make an emotional connection with their clients. Someone in their park. They'll approach a family, and they will target families because Disney believes that if they make an emotional connection with families, they will have a Disney client for life. And they'll focus on families because those families have kids. And now they've got 2 generations of Disney clients for life. And it doesn't have to be anything big. It may be someone walking around the park and they say, here, are you looking for something? Yeah, Space Mountain? Sure, we'll take you right over here. I'll walk you over. And during that walk, they'll engage them. Or they'll walk up to somebody and they'll say, hey, are you going to stay for the light parade tonight? Stand right here. This is where all the action happens. Disney believes that. Lee Resources polled companies, CEOs from across the United States and asked those CEOs, do you believe that your company delivers exceptional customer service? 80% of those CEOs said yes. Lee Resources then polled customers of those very same companies. How many do you think said those companies deliver superior customer service?
20%.
Their perception has been, okay, one tangent. I promise one tangent I won't. I was in Minneapolis last week. I was giving this talk. And I had to talk Tuesday morning first thing, and then I had the keynote on Wednesday evening, so I have basically 2 days to kill. And it has to do with perception. I'm not going to give the movie away, but I finally went to the theater. I'm a movie buff. I've been watching movies my whole life. So I go to the theater, and it's an unbelievable movie about perception. So this single dad, he has a kid that's, I don't want to say is handicapped, but he's got a physical deformity. And this guy comes in and kidnaps his son. The dad gets knocked out in the process. And he comes to and he realizes his son is gone, just gone. And the dad is going nuts, and he's looking all over for his son. He comes across this woman who is just that's crazy, but knows where his son is. And it's really cool. It's so this really conservative dad becomes this badass, and and goes after him. The only way he's going to find his son is if he hooks up the dad. So if you get a chance, 110% go see the movie because it will win an Academy Award. So anyway, the name of the movie is Finding Nemo. Think about it. Who has seen that movie? Have you seen that? Right? That's a spot-on description of that movie, right?
It is.
What was your perception? That it was a movie like Taken? Liam Neeson was going to kick everyone's ass? What would your perception have been if I would have told you that I went to see a Disney Pixar movie last night? Might have been a little different, right? The point I'm trying to make is you may believe that you are doing everything right, but for the most part, your customers don't believe it. And why don't they believe it? They're not emotionally engaged. Some of you may have seen this if you follow Simon Sinek. This is what he calls the golden circle. It's the what, how, why. So we're going to talk a lot today about Apple. And when Apple started in Steve Jobs' garage in Cupertino, California, with Steve Wozniak, Jobs was trying to compete. But who ruled Silicon Valley back then was IBM. And IBM had they're the most, I'm not trying to offend, but the most tight-ass company in the world. They were very rigid. Everyone's going to buy our stuff because it's the best. Basically, we're the only kid on the block. No emotional engagement. This was a typical IBM approach. Hello, we're IBM. We make computers. What? Beautifully made, loaded with the latest technology, and they're easy to use. The how. That's why we do what we do. Very early on, Steve Jobs knew that he could not compete financially with IBM. But he also knew that IBM was a rigid company. So I want to show you a really brief clip. And you're going to see how young Steve Jobs was. But also, just notice when he walks by, he's doing a presentation, you'll see these massive X computers. And you'll see how brilliant this guy really, really was at a very early age. Oh, why not do it again?
And one of the things I've always found is that you've got to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology. You can't start with the technology and try to figure out where you're going to try to sell it. And I've made this mistake probably more than anybody else in this room. I've got the scar tissue to prove it, and I know that it's the case. And as we have tried to come up with a strategy and a vision for Apple, it started with what incredible benefits can we give to the customer? Where can we take the customer? Not starting with, let's sit down with the engineers and figure out what awesome technology we have, and then how are we going to market that. And I think that's the right path to take.
And that was the path that Apple started to take. And Apple, Steve Jobs convinced his board of directors that we have to stop selling computers. And we have to start selling what we believe. We have to start selling the why.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. But the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
I've seen that commercial over 1,000 times, and I'm not even joking, I get goosebumps every time. Greatest commercial ever made. If you didn't know who Apple was, what business are they in? What do they do? Did you see a product? Did they mention anything that they do? Steve Jobs knew that the only way they were going to compete with IBM is they had to emotionally connect with clients. Look at my laptop. This is just a plain old, it's a great laptop. It's fantastic. How did we get connected to this? Look at this. Ooh, my light's on, sorry. How did we get connected to this? Look at it. It looks like a work of art. It's beautiful. Jobs knew that we had to emotionally connect to our product. He wanted people to emotionally connect. Yes, they have to work. Yes, 100% they have to work. But they had to be emotional connection. And I don't want you to think that I think Steve Jobs is the end-all be-all. He was a tyrant and he was a tough guy to work for. In fact, for 7 years at Apple, the #1 product was the Apple II. And Steve Jobs took the best engineers and the best designers from the Apple II team to create the Macintosh team. He convinced the board of directors that the Macintosh, when he launched it, was going to sell 1 million units the first month and 20,000 units every month for the first year. The difference between the Apple II and the Macintosh is that the Macintosh was a closed system. Back in the early days of computing, a closed system didn't exist. It means it only works with Apple products. When we first started buying computers, we all wanted to ramp them up and make them more, give them more features and benefits, but we had to get other software in order to do that. Steve Jobs said, nope, the Macintosh is going to be a completely closed system. Remember when he said he was going to sell 1 million the first month and 20,000? You know how many sold the first year? $35,000. Got him kicked out of his company. Apple started spiraling. They stopped innovating and they started selling computers and stopped selling what they believed. And Steve Jobs, 4 years away from Apple, he started, many of you know this, he started the company Next. He launched his new computer, Next. It was this perfect cube of a computer. And he was targeting the education market. The day that he launched Next, he didn't have an operating system. It didn't exist. He just had software. But he knew that if that Apple was going to target the education market, and the only way that they were going to catch up was by his company. So Steve Jobs gets bought back into the company. John Scully is out, and he starts running the company. Steve Jobs says, we have to start innovating again. We have to connect with our clientele. So what does he do? He hits a home run with the iMac. Remember the iMac? It had the little bubble on the bottom and reciprocating head. Then he hit a grand slam with the iPod. And then he hit a 1,000,000-run home run with the iPhone. And one of my favorite stories with Apple is during the development phase of the iPad. And Steve Jobs approached technology different. Typically, the way that all computers and all technology was made in Silicon Valley is they would start with the engineers. The engineers would come up with the technology. They'd go to the designers, and the designers would say, okay, you've got to build a box around this. Steve Jobs did the exact opposite. He built the box first. Simplicity, one button. He built the box first, and then he told the engineers, you've got to put the technology inside that. Because his pieces are a work of art. He wanted us to emotionally connect to those pieces. So he's at the early stages of the iPad. They're in development. And his lead designer, the guy who developed the iPad and the guy who developed the iPhone, was a guy by the name of Johnny Ive. And Johnny Ive, he's this British guy, and he was about to leave the company until Steve Jobs convinced him when he came back to stay. So Johnny Ive was really one of the two people in the entire company besides Steve Wozniak that could push back on Steve Jobs. And they were at the development stage of the iPad, and the engineers came in, and he brought Johnny Ive with him, and the engineers were showing him where they were at. And the lead engineer said, Steve, we don't get this. We don't understand. Everything you can do on the iPad, you can already do on the iMac, and you can already do on the iPhone. Why do we need this? And Steve Jobs looked his engineer directly in the eye and he said, they don't know what they're going to do with it because we haven't effing told them yet. Imagine your life without him now. He knew 110% that was going to be their biggest product to date because we were emotionally attached to Apple. Because we bought into what they believe. And if you still don't believe that Apple has the most reliable and most emotionally engaged customer base, this is the American Retailers Association. Now, the American Retailer Association bases success of box stores on the amount of sales per square foot of retail space. They don't include the warehouse or the POS, the point of sales, or anything. The literal retail floor. So your typical box stores, your Macy's, your Kohl's, they're going to average between $160, $200 per square foot of retail space. Tiffany's, the most expensive retail store in the world, averages just over $3,100. The Apple Store downtown Manhattan, over $6,000 per square foot of retail space, and they're doing it with about 12 products. We have bought in. Now, before I go further, I just want to, there are certain companies that have caught lightning in a bottle and had a campaign similar to Apple that just talked about what they believe. We bought into Apple because we loved the fact that they challenge the status quo. They think differently. We can be a little crazy, and they see genius. We all bought into that. In 1967, Herb Kellenhauser started Southwest Airlines. And Southwest at the time was an intrastate airline. They just served the state of Texas. They had 10 planes. And they just gradually started to grow, and they added a route here to, they would add Atlanta, Las Vegas, Miami, and they started to grow a little bit, but realized it was really difficult to compete with the big boys. Then in 2008, or 2007, 2008, the airlines started doing what to us? Started charging us for our bags. Remember that? I was so pissed off that first time. Imagine that. $35 to $40 for a bag. You're a family. You're a family of 5. Husband, wife, 3 kids. Taking a week down to Disney because you're emotionally connected. $40 a bag. That's $200 at the airport you got to pay. Oh, by the way, when you hop on the plane on the way home, you got to give us another $200. Southwest Airlines realized how frustrated people were. And what did they do? Does anyone remember the ads back then? I know it's a long time ago. What was their ad campaign? At Southwest, your bags fly free. Who did the commercial? They didn't hire actors. They hired actual baggage handlers for Southwest Airlines. In the first commercial they did, they had these baggage handlers. You fly free. Throw it on the computer. You fly free. All of a sudden, Southwest Airlines was not only competing with the big boys, they were destroying the big boys. And today, Southwest Airlines delivers more passengers in the United States than any other American-based airline. One idea. Here, your bags fly free. And still today, your bags fly free. CEOs and business owners are afraid of competition, despise competition, when you should really embrace it. Because competition exposes our weaknesses, exposes the weaknesses in our companies. Southwest proved that. Another company, you guys are way too young for this, there's only a couple of you old enough to know. Domino's Pizza, struggling franchise. To this day, what do we know Domino's for? Pizza in about 30 minutes or it's free. That was their initial ad campaign. Domino's understood that we were frustrated to go to our local pizzeria and we were going to get a pizza on Super Bowl Sunday. It's going to take 2.5 hours. We were all willing to sacrifice quality to know that if I ordered that pizza at 5:30, my kids were eating at 6. Leading pizza franchise in the country. Others got onto it. Lens crafters. What's lens crafters? Glasses in about an hour. If I go to my eye doctor, it takes 2 to 3 weeks to get my glasses. You mean I can get mine in an hour? All those companies caught lightning in a bottle, but what did they all have in common? They emotionally engaged to us. We were frustrated at how long it took to get a pizza. We were frustrated that we got to pay for our bag. I mean, I got to go on a vacation. I saved up all year to go on this vacation. Now you want to gouge me for more just so I can bring my luggage? And they connected with us on a single idea, much like Apple. If you remember anything today, remember this. This is absolutely true. And a lot of CEOs do not believe it. People follow you and your companies because they want to, not because they have to. Apple proved that. And one other man proved that. And literally changed the world.
I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its dream. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created.
You've all heard that speech? There were certainly many other African Americans back in the 60s that were far more oppressed than Martin Luther King Jr. But what made Martin Luther King, what made him one of the best leaders the world has ever known, is that he didn't tell people what needed to change. How effective would that speech have been if it was called, "I Have a Plan"? Probably not very good. Martin Luther King told people what he believes. Those 250,000 people didn't travel to Washington, D.C. on a 90-degree August day for Martin Luther King. They traveled there for themselves. They took what he believes and they made it their own. Those 250,000 people didn't go there for him, they went there for themselves because they took what he believes and made it their own and effectively changed the world. Emotionally connected. So now we're going to talk about how the human brain works. And why, remember when we talked about learned behavior very early on? We're going to start out with the neocortex, the neopaleo. It's the largest part of the cerebral cortex. This is the part of the brain that has the capacity for language, has the capacity for cognitive thinking, for reason. This is the part of the brain that can take millions and millions, all this information, data, features, benefits, facts, figures, and cognitively understand it and comprehend it. But the neocortex has nothing to do with decision making. For that, we go to the limbic system, or the limbic brain, quoted before the cerebrum. The limbic system does not have the capacity for analytical thought. It has the capacity for long-term memory. It has the capacity, simple it down. You ever had a gut feeling something feels right or something feels wrong, the hairs on the back of your neck, your gut feeling? That's the limbic system. 100% of human behavior comes from the limbic system. But what's the mistake that all of us make as salespeople? The number one mistake. We inundate our clients with all these facts and figures and features and benefits, and Chet's Plumbing is the goddamn best plumbing, and here's why. That needs to be a part of your sales presentation, but it's not driving decision making. Not at all. It needs to be a part of it, but that's what we're focusing on. How wonderful our company is and how much better we are than everyone else. It's not driving decision making. So let's go back to IBM. IBM was getting their asses whipped by Apple. The iPhone, the iPad was destroying them. But IBM made a shift. They were done with you and I. They were going to focus strictly on business. So what does IBM do? They invest hundreds of millions of dollars on AI, artificial intelligence. And they come up with the greatest artificial intelligence the world has ever seen. And that is Watson.
Bob Dylan, to improve my language skills, I've read all your lyrics.
You read all of my lyrics.
I can read 800 million pages per second.
It's fast.
My analysis shows your major themes are that time passes and love fades.
That sounds about right.
I have never known love.
Maybe we should write a song together.
I can sing.
You can sing.
Doobie-bop, bebop-a-doo. Doobie-doobie-doo. Doobie-doo.
If you don't think that was a direct shot at Apple and Steve Jobs, you don't know Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs idolized Bob Dylan. Idolized Bob Dylan. So they spent hundreds of millions of dollars on artificial intelligence. And how do they show it? A circle, looked like a little guy. He was really excited. So the next phase was, okay, something that was relatable to us. We don't understand what this artificial intelligence is, but you mean if I just talk to my little computer, it's going to give me any answer I want? This is before Siri came along, but now you know where Siri came from. So what was the next thing they did? The next thing they did is they took Watson and they put him on Jeopardy. To show that makes us all look really, well, not all of you, makes me look really stupid. And who did they put Watson up against? It was a 2-day tournament. They put him up against Ken Jennings, who won 74 consecutive games of Jeopardy. No one has ever won even close to that. Then they put him up against Brad Rutter, who won more money in the history of Jeopardy than anyone, and they put Watson up against him. And they did it at IBM Research Headquarters. It was a 2-day tournament, and what happened with Watson? He absolutely rolled him. Absolutely destroyed him. That little circle with the little spiky hair killed the best 2 humans who ever played a game of Jeopardy. Do we care that Watson has over 50 trillion bits, 50 trillion terabytes? Think about that. 50 trillion terabytes of information is involved in Watson. They're the best artificial intelligence the world has ever seen. Can you imagine dedicating the last 15 years of your life to come up with that? And really the only thing we care to know about is ask our computer who does the voice of Bart Simpson. Probably all we care, you know. But they dedicated their life. And this, like, said IBM is the global leader in artificial intelligence. Why? Because that little icon was something we could identify with. And it was cute. He had kind of a cool voice. Now IBM is the global leader in artificial intelligence. And Matt, I apologize, I'm going to make this really, really quick. The company I work for, these are our 6 corporate drivers. I'm not making this into a Miron commercial, but relationships, dreams, innovation, solutions, and sustainability, communities. What do all 6 of those have in common? We are trying to emotionally connect with you. Number 1 is relationships. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. This is our vision statement. Our commitment reaches beyond construction. Our passion brings dreams to life. We can bring those to life. That's how wonderful we are. Has it worked for our company? 8 years ago, we were coming out of the recession, and our focus was to be the biggest construction company in the state of Wisconsin. When we hired a gentleman who said, you know what? Why are we worried about being the biggest? Why don't we just focus on being the best, and the rest will take care of itself? We're a $1.1 billion company, and 76% of our business comes from repeat clients. It works because we emotionally connect with relationships. So I'm going to tell you, still got enough time to tell you, yes I do, okay. So I'm going to tell you 2 real quick stories, one personal, one professional. As I said, I've been giving this talk for 8 or 9 years now. And 2 years ago, I was Christmas shopping for my son Michael, and he wanted one of these wireless speakers. And I went in to the first shop and I said, where are your wireless speakers? The guy just says, over there by the CDs. Okay, I walk over there. I don't know anything about these things. I'm the most technologically ignorant person on the planet. I look at him, I have no idea what I'm looking for. Next one comes up. Okay. He goes, young lady says, walks me over, says, they're right over here. If you got any questions, somebody will be over here in a while. Not really great experiences. I went to the third store. And I haven't had their permission to say it, I don't think it's mine, but it rhymes with West Guy. So I went into West Guy, and I said, hey, could you put me to your wireless speakers? Young kid named Justin. Kid was in high school. Springs up. He was loading up shelves. He goes, absolutely, come on with me. And he walks me over. And he says, hey, my name's Justin. I said, Justin, how are you? My name's Paul. Great to see you. He goes, so is this a gift for you? Or is this a gift for someone? I said, well, it's a gift for my son, Michael. And he says, awesome. He goes, you got any questions about this? I said, I don't know the first thing about any of these things. And I said, so Justin, if you were gonna buy one, what one would you buy? And he tells me the one he's gonna buy. He goes, tell you what, Paul, do me a favor. Give this to Michael, and if he loves it, great. If he doesn't like it, bring it back and we'll exchange it for something he wants. But if he likes it, bring him back. Because I'm gonna show him a few tips on how to make it better, increase the range, make the sound even better than it does. I was blown away by this high school kid. Blown away. What Justin didn't know, I'm a single dad. My kid was in college at the time. I don't get to spend a whole lot of time with him. Now I'm gonna get him a really cool gift and then be the cool dad that gets to go show him how it can even be better. So he can go show all his friends how cool it is. Since that moment, I have bought 2 big screen TVs and 2 iPads from Justin at Westcott. That's the impact he made on me. That's the impact we can have all. Because he took the time to sell me a speaker during Christmas. The last story I'm going to tell you is a professional story. We had been shortlisted for a project to build a new football field in Maryland. And the biggest challenge that we had is that the football field had to be done over the summer. Now, the school year ended in June because they had track and field going on until mid-June. And the football field had to be done by the end of August for their football home opener. So one of my jobs is I prep our interview teams when they're interviewing for the project. And I get done with we're doing interview practice, we're doing interview prep. So they're running through their presentation. And they get all done, and so it's the architectural firm we're working with, a firm right here on Stevens Point, and our team. And they get done, and boy, we nailed that. We're going to get this. He said, what do you think? And they said, we don't have it. We don't have a thing. They said, what do you mean? I said, let me ask you a question. What are we building? And they all looked at me a lot like what you're looking at me right now. I'm really confused and bored. What are you building right now? What are we building? One guy finally says, we're building a damn football stadium. I said, wrong. That's the delivery vehicle. What are we building? We're building a lifetime of memories. What if the first memory of this new shiny football stadium was that they had to play their home opener on the road because the damn field wasn't done? You're interviewing in front of the leadership of this school. You're telling me that none of those people that you're interviewing in front of has a son that plays on the football team? A son or daughter that's in the marching band? A daughter that's on the cheerleading team? Redo it. Stop talking about yourself and talking about what we're creating. We're creating a lifetime of memories. All of us. I, to this day, bore the shit out of my friends. For my son Michael, hit the game-winning buzzer beater, East versus West, his junior and senior year. I still got the video. I bored the shit out of my friends with that. We're creating a lifetime of memories. So I went to the dedication that Saturday afternoon for the home opener, and I asked the athletic director, I said, so, just out of curiosity, why did you choose us? We weren't the cheapest. He said, we chose you because you're the only company that got it. You understood what we were trying to do here. I said, what we're trying to do? He goes, this day none of these kids will ever forget. We created memories, lifetime memories, emotionally connected with them. So the $100 question, how do we do it? How do you emotionally connect with clients? How many of you in this room make cold calls? Any of you make cold calls? Literally every week. Number 1, use your internal network. If you want to get by the goalie, use your internal network. How easy is it to get past that goalie if I can say, hey Todd, I'm leaving Todd a message. Todd, your good friend Karen told me to give you a call. How likely are you to get that call back? God trusts Karen, loves Karen. God's going to return that call. I have over 1,700 followers on LinkedIn or connections on LinkedIn. Think of this as LinkedIn. I hope each of you connect with me on LinkedIn today. My kids were freshmen in college, both of them. I said, your freshman year, get on LinkedIn and connect with me. They now have access to my network of 1,700 people. Use your existing network. It is the most undervalued and underutilized asset that each of us have. Number 2, get involved in your community. That sounds kind of dumb, doesn't it? Does it? Get involved in your Chamber of Commerce. Get on the board of directors or volunteer at the Boys and Girls Club. Whatever organization you want to get in. Humane Society, get involved. What do each of these organizations have on their website? They list their board of directors. You've been always trying to get into the guy at Century Insurance. He's serving on some board locally, I guarantee it. Get involved in that organization. Now you both have something that you have in common, that you are both emotionally committed to. Get involved in your community, serve on boards, but do your research. Look who's on it. Who's that client you've always been trying to get into? Find out where they're serving. Look on everything, the chamber, Boys and Girls Club, YMCAs. Find out where these people are involved. Now you have an emotional connection with the people you're trying to reach. And finally, this is a cheesy one. I'll get to know your customers. I know my customers, do you? What drives your customers? Money? Family? Sports? Dance? Theater? What is it? I always have before COVID, I always had every one of my meetings at their office, in their location. So I could be surrounded by the hints of what drives them. And I'll tell you a very, very quick story. I met a person that we have now since been one of our top local clients. I met him in his office, and behind his desk he had a bookshelf, a credenza. And he had bookends. And the bookends, you know those, have you ever seen the theater masks, that iconic, it's the black and white masks? Well, his bookends were theater masks. One was black, one was white. And I'm like, that likes theater. I've seen 2 plays in my entire life. 2. I saw Death of the Salesman, because I'm a huge Willie Loman fan, and I saw The $1 Million Quartet, which, by the way, if you get a chance to see, is fantastic. I've seen 2 plays in my entire life, but what was huge back then was Hamilton. A buddy of mine, I'd seen Hamilton 3 times. I called him up, I said, hey, meet me for a beer, tell me everything about Hamilton. 2 weeks later, I happened to be driving by, and just popped in, didn't talk business at all. Said, hey, how you doing? I was just driving by, just thought I'd pop in and say hi. We spent 90 minutes talking about Hamilton. We became emotionally connected. Found out his daughter is huge into dance. Asked, hey, when's her next recital? Shot him a quick text or email or text the next day. Hey, how did your daughter's dance recital go last night? The next 4 visits, we never talked business. We just talked theater, dance, kids. Today, that client hands us work. We don't get anything anymore. Because we connected. We connected on a level beyond client, beyond what a traditional client. I care about his family. I have been invited to 3 weddings of clients of mine, either theirs or their kids' weddings, because we connected on an emotional level. Remember the slide that I told you, what's the number 1 influencer? Recommendations from people they know and love. Right? If your client believes and realizes they have an emotional connection with you, by default they have an emotional connection to the company you represent. And that's the payoff. And that's how you create a client for life. Thank you so much for listening, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
You did, Paul, thank you. Any questions for Paul? No questions.
Thank you very much for coming today. It was great to actually be at the office.
Our next business exchange, again, in person, will be July 14th, and Red Shoes, Kathy is here today, right? Yep, is going to be our presenter and our sponsor. Social media for small businesses. Wow, without feeling overwhelmed. So watch for more details to come. Again, that's July 14th. If you haven't registered for the annual dinner, Todd mentioned that. Reservations are due today, so email me, go online. We'd love to see you there. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.